She crashed, driving away from her own wedding. The vampire king became her salvation. The sky was a broken tapestry of black clouds, stitched together by streaks of lightning. Rain poured in sheets, drumming a frantic rhythm on the roof of the carriage. Inside, Lady Seraphine clutched the damp silk of her wedding dress, her fingers trembling. The hem, heavy with mud and rain, soaked her legs. Her heart raced faster than the horse's hooves on the slippery road, and her mind screamed at her to keep going, to run, to never look back. She had promised herself she would not be trapped. Not in this gilded cage, not in the arms of a man whose smiles were as hollow as the cathedral's echoing halls. Her betrothed, Lord Malric, was a man of ambition and cruelty, a noble whose name brought fear rather than respect. Behind the polite bow and courteous words lay chains Seraphine would never wear willingly. The forest loomed ahead, dark and endless. The rain-slicked road twisted like a serpent through towering oaks, their branches clawing at the night sky. Seraphine leaned forward, urging the carriage onward, willing the horses to outrun the fear clawing at her chest. Her chest tightened as the wind whipped her hair across her face, and she glimpsed the chapel in the distance, its lights fading as if mocking her escape. A thunderclap shook the earth beneath the wheels, and the carriage hit a hidden root. It lurched violently, the driver thrown forward with a shout. Seraphine screamed, the sound swallowed by the storm. Wheels struck the soft, waterlogged ground, and the carriage tilted perilously. Before she could react, the vehicle skidded, twisted, and crashed into the thick undergrowth. The world blurred. Pain shot through her shoulder and leg, sharp and insistent. The carriage had toppled, and the horses had bolted into the storm. Seraphine tried to move, but the mud held her fast. She swallowed against the taste of fear, shivering, soaked, and utterly alone. Then came the shadows. At first, she thought it was her imagination, a trick of the lightning, but the darkness gathered at the edge of the wreckage, forming shapes that moved with impossible grace. A figure emerged, tall and silent, stepping through the rain like it was nothing at all. His clothes were dark, his eyes brighter than the storm itself. He carried an aura of power so absolute that Seraphine's knees almost gave way under it. "I will help you," the stranger said, his voice smooth and certain, cutting through the rain like a blade. Who are you?" she whispered, fear and wonder tangled in her throat. "Call me Lucian," he replied, stepping closer. Even in the rain there was an air of majesty about him, as if the world itself bent to his presence. "You should not have been out here alone!" Seraphine's chest tightened again. His gaze, dark and unreadable, made her feel exposed, yet safe at the same time, a contradiction that unsettled her. She tried to shake off the lingering panic, but her body would not obey. Lucian knelt beside her, moving with careful, deliberate grace, his hands steady as he helped her from the mud. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Lightning illuminated the pale strength of his features. Sharp cheekbones, eyes like storm clouds, and hair dark as midnight. Seraphine wanted to look away, wanted to resist the pull she felt, but something about him was magnetic, impossible to deny. He carried her to a place of shelter, a castle that rose from the forest like a dark sentinel. Its stones were slick with rain, ancient and cold, yet the gates opened as if expecting them. Seraphine's mind raced. How could someone live here? How could anyone move so easily in the heart of a storm in a forest that had been abandoned for centuries? "You're safe here," Lucian said, his tone brooking no argument. "But you cannot leave. Not yet." "Not leave." Seraphine's voice trembled, a mix of disbelief and fear. I need to go back. She stopped, realizing she didn't need to go back at all. She needed freedom, not safety in the arms of someone else. And yet the idea of returning to her wedding, to the life waiting for her, made her stomach twist. Lucian studied her carefully, as if he could see the storm inside her as clearly as the one raging outside. "You ran from something," he said softly. "I will not force you to stay, but you must stay safe. You cannot survive the night alone." Seraphine's mind spun. Who was this man? How did he know? And why did the sound of his voice make her heart ache, as if it belonged somewhere she had never been allowed to go? Inside the castle, warmth and shadow met in equal measure.
Candles flickered along the walls, and the smell of old stone and smoke filled the air. It was quiet, too quiet, except for the occasional drip of rain through cracks in the roof. Lucian laid her down on a couch, careful not to touch her more than necessary. His eyes lingered on her, intense and inscrutable.
"I am fine," Seraphine said, though her voice broke. She forced herself to stand, to assert control, but her legs felt weak.
Lucian's hand stopped her, not in anger, but in calm authority. "Rest.
"Only when your body recovers will you think clearly."
Something in his gaze warned her that this was not a suggestion. Against her instincts she nodded, realizing she had no strength to argue.
The night deepened, and the storm outside raged on, as if furious at her escape. Seraphine could hear the wind howling through the ancient stones, the thunder rolling like distant drums, and her mind drifted between fear and fascination. Lucian moved silently through the shadows, checking the gates, listening, watching. She could feel his presence, even when he was out of sight. Hours passed, though she could not tell how many. Her eyelids grew heavy, and she finally allowed herself to surrender to sleep. But in the corners of the darkened hall, whispers seemed to stir. Old voices, unseen, warning her perhaps of the strange fate she had stumbled into. When she awoke, the storm had passed. Moonlight streamed through tall windows, casting silver patterns on the floor. Lucian was sitting nearby, as though he had never left. The sight of him startled her. He looked more alive in the light than she could have imagined, and yet something about him was otherworldly, terrifying in its perfection. "You are awake," he said, his voice low, almost gentle.
"Good! You must eat."
"Strength will be needed soon." "Eat?" Seraphine asked, confused. "What do you mean?" Lucian smiled faintly, a shadow of amusement crossing his features. "Food. You cannot survive on fear alone, and soon you may need all the strength your body can give you." Death to the turncoat? Seraphine's mind raced. What had she stumbled into? This was no ordinary man. He was powerful beyond her understanding, and yet he had saved her life. A strange warmth, unfamiliar and unwelcome, stirred in her chest. She could not deny it, though she tried. He had become a lifeline, a mystery, a danger all at once. As she ate, Lucian spoke little, but each word carried weight. "You cannot return to your world," he said finally. "Not yet. The roads are unsafe, and there are forces that would see you harmed before you could even reach the village." Her heart clenched. I can't stay here. I don't belong in this place." "No one truly belongs," Lucian replied, his eyes piercing hers. "But some find themselves exactly where they are meant to be. Perhaps this is your fate." The words chilled her, yet in them lay an undeniable truth. She did not want to stay, yet a part of her feared leaving. Not because of him, but because the world she had fled held nothing but chains and despair. Lucian offered danger, yes, but also freedom of a kind she had never known. Night deepened again. Seraphine could hear the faint sigh of wind through the cracks in the castle walls and the sound of her own heartbeat pounding against her ribs. The fire flickered, casting shadows that danced like living spirits. She wanted to speak, to demand answers, but the fear and exhaustion held her silent. Then a sound that made her freeze, gates clanging, echoing in the hall, as though a storm had returned, not outside, but inside the castle. Lucian's eyes narrowed, his body tensing, as though he had been expecting this moment. "You cannot leave here," he said, his voice low, dangerous and commanding. "Not yet. Until your soul is ready, you are mine to protect." Seraphine's chest tightened. The words were not possessive, yet they felt like chains. Her heart ached, torn between fear and something else, something she did not yet understand. Her body longed to run, yet she could not move. She wanted freedom, yet the safety he offered called to her in ways she could not resist.
For the first time in her life, she felt truly trapped, not by others, not by her past, but by the pull of a man who was more than human, and a fate she did not yet understand.
Outside, the night was still. Rain whispered against the castle walls. And inside, Seraphine sat frozen, staring at the man who had saved her, and wondering, what had she truly escaped? The castle was silent except for the faint hiss of rain dripping from the towers. Seraphine pressed her hands to the cold stone walls, trying to steady the tremor in her legs. The gates were sealed. No matter how she tried, they would not budge. Panic rose like a tide in her chest, but even in that fear, a part of her could not ignore the strange calm that Lucien's presence brought. He appeared behind her, silent as the shadows themselves. His eyes, dark yet piercing, softened for a brief moment as they met hers. "You're frightened," he said, stating what was obvious, yet his tone carried no judgment. I don't know what to do," Seraphine admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't leave, and I can't stay here forever. I just wanted freedom." Lucien's expression did not change, but there was a flicker of something in his gaze. Concern, perhaps, or curiosity. "Freedom is rarely granted without cost," he said. "And sometimes what we flee from is not the world, but ourselves." Seraphine frowned. His words were unsettling, yet impossible to ignore. Something about him seemed to reach beyond the fear in her, beyond the cold stones and the storm. She didn't understand him, and perhaps she never would, yet a strange trust began to form, fragile as glass, but real. He led her through the castle, each step echoing softly against the ancient stones. The halls were filled with shadows, and the air carried a faint, unplaceable fragrance, like old roses, dust, and something darker, something alive. Seraphine noticed that the castle seemed to change as they moved. Corridors twisted in ways that did not make sense, and doors appeared where none should exist. "This place," she began, looking around, "it doesn't feel natural." Lucien smiled faintly, a shadow of amusement crossing his features. "It is not meant to be natural. My kingdom exists between worlds." "Mortals rarely walk these halls, and those who do seldom leave unchanged." Seraphine shivered. "Changed in what way?" "In ways you will understand soon," he said, his voice low and enigmatic. "Perhaps in ways you are not yet ready to face." He stopped before a large chamber, the walls lined with books, ancient scrolls, and artifacts she could not begin to name. A fire burned in the hearth, casting flickering light across the room. Lucien gestured for her to sit. "You must rest," he said. "You cannot heal if your mind and body are not nourished, and soon you will need all the strength you can muster." Seraphine sat cautiously. "All the strength I can muster, for what?" Lucien's eyes darkened, and for the first time his centuries of experience seemed to weigh heavily upon him. "There are forces in this world, shadows that have waited a long time. They are drawn to the living, to the unguarded heart. You, Seraphine, are of interest to them." Her stomach tightened. I don't understand. You will?" he said softly. "And when you do, you will see why you cannot return to the life you fled. The world you left behind is no longer safe, not for you." Seraphine felt the pulse of fear and awe mingling in her chest. He spoke with certainty, yet the weight of his words carried an almost mythical authority. She wanted to resist, wanted to assert that she could survive without him, yet the thought of returning to her wedding, to the life waiting for her, felt unbearable. Days passed in a blur of silence and quiet learning. Lucien moved like a shadow, always near but never imposing, teaching her the unspoken rules of his castle. Seraphine discovered that the walls themselves seemed alive, listening, watching, and occasionally shifting to guide or protect them. She tried to explore, but the castle's secrets were layered and complex. Some corridors twisted into themselves, others led to rooms that did not appear on any map. And always Lucien was there, patient, watchful, and impossibly powerful. "You must understand," he said one evening, as the two walked through the moonlit gardens, "that power alone is not enough. Strength comes from knowledge, courage, and the ability to trust. Without trust, even the mightiest fall.
Seraphine glanced at him, her gaze caught by the way his shadow stretched across the silver-lit grass.
And you, do you trust anyone?
Lucien's face was unreadable, but there was a glimmer of something in his eyes. "I trusted once," he said quietly, "and it was my undoing."
Now, trust is measured.
She understood that. He had been hurt, perhaps betrayed, and yet he saved her. And in that act he gave her a choice, a freedom that was both terrifying and intoxicating. One night as the moon rose high and the stars scattered across the black sky, the castle was attacked. Shadows slipped through the outer walls, silent, deadly, and relentless. Seraphine awoke to the sound of whispers, like wind through dead branches, and a chill that made her bones ache. Lucien was already awake, moving with a speed and grace that was almost unnatural. "Stay close," he commanded, his eyes glinting in the darkness. "Do not wander!" Seraphine followed, her heart hammering in her chest. They moved through the halls like spirits, avoiding the creatures that lurked in the shadows. She saw him fight, swift, precise, and merciless. And yet, even in battle, there was a strange beauty to him, a dark elegance that made her pulse quicken despite the danger. The creatures retreated into the night, but the encounter left Seraphine shaken. She realized that she had been living in a sheltered world, believing that fear was something distant, something that happened only to others. Here, in Lucien's world, fear was immediate, tangible, and yet exhilarating. "You were brave," Lucien said quietly as they stood in the moonlit courtyard afterward, the rain having returned in gentle mist. "Not everyone would have faced them without fleeing." "I was terrified," Seraphine admitted, her voice trembling. "But I had to try. I couldn't just hide." He studied her, his gaze lingering in a way that made her skin warm. "Perhaps that is why you are here," he said softly. "Not by chance, but because you have the courage that others lack. And courage is a gift in a world where fear rules." The emotional tension between them grew with each passing day. Seraphine could not deny her fascination, nor could she ignore the respect and awe that Lucien commanded. And yet, there was still fear. Fear of him. Fear of the unknown. Fear of losing herself in a world she barely understood. Days turned into nights, and nights into a rhythm of learning, exploration, and quiet reflection. Seraphine discovered parts of herself she had never known, the ability to endure pain, the instinct to survive, the flicker of a strength that had lain dormant. Lucien became both teacher and enigma, guiding her, protecting her, and yet allowing her the space to grow. One evening, as the castle slept under a blanket of mist, Seraphine wandered into a tower she had not seen before. The room was filled with mirrors, each reflecting not just her image, but faint, shifting shapes behind her. She gasped, spinning around, only to find Lucien standing silently at the doorway. "You cannot hide from yourself here," he said softly. "These mirrors show not just your form, but your fears, your regrets, the parts of you have tried to bury." Seraphine swallowed hard, looking into the glass. She saw herself, yes, but also a reflection of the life she had fled, twisted and distant. And she saw him, Lucien, his gaze fixed on her, unblinking, unwavering, as though he could see through every layer she had tried to hide. I don't understand," she whispered. "You will," he said, stepping closer. "And when you do, you will know why you were brought here. Perhaps this castle, this world, is exactly where you are meant to be, even if you do not yet believe it." For the first time, Seraphine felt a shift inside her. Fear remained, yes, but beneath it, a spark of something else. Curiosity, trust, even longing. She did not yet know the depth of the connection forming between them, nor the trials that would test it, but she knew in that quiet moment that nothing would ever be the same again. As dawn approached, Seraphine felt a faint, insistent tug, a whisper of destiny that she could neither resist nor ignore. And then, in the courtyard, she saw movement beyond the walls of the castle. Shadows, faint yet deliberate, watching, waiting. Lucian noticed them too, his eyes narrowing, lips pressed in a thin line.
"They are coming," he said, the weight of centuries in his voice. "And soon you will see why your courage brought you here." Seraphine's heart pounded, but for the first time she did not step back. She met his gaze, and something unspoken passed between them. A promise of protection, a bond forming in the shadow of danger, and a spark of something neither fully understood. The storm outside had passed, but the storm within was only beginning. And as the first light of morning touched the castle towers, Seraphine realized that her life had changed forever. She was no longer just a bride who ran from a wedding. She was a woman bound to a world of shadows, secrets, and a man who was as dangerous as he was captivating. And she knew, deep in her heart, that the choices she made now would shape not just her fate, but the fate of all who dwelled in this realm of darkness and light. The morning mist clung to the castle walls, softening the edges of the towers and giving the ancient stones an ethereal glow. Seraphine walked to the corridors silently, her mind restless with questions and unease. The shadows from the previous night's attack had not disappeared. They lingered, whispering at the edges of her awareness.
Lucian moved beside her, quiet, measured, as if he could sense every flicker of fear in her heart.
His presence was a constant, a dark anchor in the swirling uncertainty that clung to her like a second skin. "You have questions," he said finally, his voice low and careful. "I can feel them. Ask them." Seraphine hesitated. To ask would mean revealing the depth of her fear, her confusion, her own fragile hope. But she could not remain silent. "Who are they?" she whispered. "The ones outside, and why are they after me?" Lucian's expression darkened, and for the first time the weight of centuries pressed visibly upon him. "They are remnants of a curse," he said, his gaze distant. "A darkness born long before you or I walked this world. They seek the living, the ones tied to it, the ones who could break it." "Break it," Seraphine repeated, the words trembling in her throat. "What curse?" Lucian paused as if measuring her readiness. Then he spoke, his voice heavy with centuries of loss. "This castle, my kingdom, it is bound by shadows. A betrayal long ago twisted the hearts of those I trusted, and the curse spread. It consumes hope, feeds on fear, and binds souls in darkness. The one who can undo it is immortal with blood unbroken by fear, untainted by chains. You, Seraphine, may be that mortal." Seraphine's breath caught. "Me? I'm just a girl who ran from a wedding. How could I break a curse that has lasted centuries?" Lucian's eyes softened, and a rare, fragile smile touched his lips. "Courage does not always come from greatness," he said. "Sometimes it comes from simply refusing to be broken. That is why you are here, why you survived the night, why you were brought to me." The weight of his words pressed down on her chest. She had fled a life of control and expectation, and now she was being asked to face darkness she could not even name. Fear warred with something else, something deeper, a quiet fire that had begun to flicker inside her. "You will not face this alone," Lucian continued, his tone soft but firm. "But you must understand. The path is dangerous. Every step tests your heart, your courage, and your trust, and the curse does not forgive weakness." Seraphine swallowed hard, feeling the enormity of what he was asking. Her life had been shaped by fear, by abandonment, by others' expectations, and yet, for the first time, she sensed a possibility of power. Not the cruel, controlling power she had fled from, but a power born from choice, from courage, from love. That night, the castle was quiet. Rain had returned, drumming softly on the ancient stones. Seraphine sat by the window, staring at the forest beyond, wondering what awaited her. Lucian entered without a sound, carrying a small lantern that cast warm light on the shadows. "You think you are ready," he said, But there are truths you have not yet faced. What truths? She asked, her voice trembling. The truth of your bloodline, he said, kneeling beside her. You are not merely immortal. Your ancestors carried a light, an unbroken line that binds to this curse in ways most do not understand. That is why they seek you, why the shadows move so fiercely, and why you survived. Seraphine's mind reeled. My bloodline? I don't understand. My family, they abandoned me. They said I was defective. That I could never belong. Lucien's hand rested lightly on hers, a gesture of connection that made her pulse quicken. They feared what they could not control, he said softly. But fear is not truth. And the strength you carry, the courage you did not know you had, that is real. That is why you survived. That is why you are here.
Tears pricked her eyes. She had spent so long running from the world, from herself, from the pain of rejection, that she had forgotten the quiet fire that lived inside her.
And now, facing a darkness older than memory itself, she realized that fire was the only thing that could guide her. Over the next days, Lucien began to teach her more about the curse, about the creatures that moved in the shadows, and about the delicate balance of his realm. He was patient yet firm, pushing her to understand that strength was not only in skill or courage, but in trust, in connection, in embracing the heart she had long hidden. They trained in the courtyard under the silver light of the moon, practicing movements that blended agility and grace, preparing for the battles that would surely come.
Seraphine found herself learning not just the physical but the emotional. How to face fear without fleeing, how to act with purpose, and how to rely on someone without losing herself. One evening, after a long day of training, they sat by the hearth. The fire cast warm patterns on their faces, highlighting shadows and light alike. Seraphine looked at Lucien, the weight of unspoken questions pressing on her.
Why me? She asked finally. Why not someone stronger, someone braver, someone older? Why me?
Lucien's gaze met hers, steady and unwavering.
Because you have something they do not, he said quietly. You have a heart that still beats with hope. You have courage even in fear. And most of all, you have the choice to love, to forgive, to rise above what the world has done to you. That is more powerful than any sword or spell.
Her heart ached at his words. They were comforting, yet terrifying.
To be chosen, to be needed. It was both a gift and a burden heavier than anything she had ever carried. Days passed, and Seraphine grew stronger, both in body and spirit. Yet the shadows outside the castle walls never ceased their movement. Each night she felt their gaze, felt the pull of the curse reaching for her, whispering doubts and fears into her mind.
One night she ventured to the highest tower, the wind whipping her hair across her face. She looked out at the forest below, a sea of darkness stretching endlessly. She thought of her past, of the family that had abandoned her, of the life she had fled. A deep ache settled in her chest, the kind that comes from loss, loneliness, and longing for something unattainable. Lucien appeared beside her, silent as always, yet his presence was a comfort rather than a threat.
You carry much,
he said, his voice low, almost gentle.
But you are not alone, not here. Not with me.
Seraphine swallowed hard. I am afraid, she admitted, the words slipping free despite her attempts to guard herself.
I am afraid of losing myself, afraid of failing, afraid of everything.
Lucien reached out, lightly brushing a strand of wet hair from her face.
Fear is natural, he said. But courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting in spite of it. You are stronger than you know, Seraphine. Stronger than even I can measure.
Their eyes met, and in that silent moment the distance between them narrowed. Something unspoken passed. A connection, a recognition, a fragile trust growing amidst the shadows. She realized that the pull she felt toward him was not only fascination or fear, but a deeper longing she had never known, a recognition of someone who could see her fully without judgment. The next day brought the first real test. Shadows gathered at the edge of the forest, moving with deliberate intent. Lucian prepared her, his hands steady and precise, his instructions clear.
"Do not falter," he said. "Do not doubt yourself. Trust me, and trust your own strength."
They moved through the castle grounds together, confronting the creatures with courage Seraphine did not know she possessed. Every step, every strike, every decision was a test, not only of skill, but of heart. And as the last shadow fled, Seraphine felt a thrill she had never imagined. Fear, yes, but also triumph and a deepening bond with the man who had saved her life and who now trusted her with his. Afterward, they stood together, their breaths heavy, their hands brushing. Lucian's eyes softened, revealing a glimpse of vulnerability he rarely showed.
"You have done well," he said quietly. "More than well. You have begun to understand what it means to be truly strong."
Seraphine's pulse quickened. She had survived, yes, but more than that, she had faced herself, faced fear, and found a spark of power within her she had never known. And yet she could not ignore the shadow lingering at the edge of her awareness. The curse was not yet broken, and forces beyond her understanding still watched, waiting, patient and unyielding. That night, as the moon bathed the castle in silver light, Lucian and Seraphine stood on the highest balcony. The forest below was quiet, but the air carried a warning, a promise of trials yet to come. Lucian's voice broke the silence.
"Soon you will face truths that will test everything you have learned. You will see the past you fled, the family you mourn, and the shadows that still bind this kingdom. And in that moment you must decide, will you embrace your courage, your heart, your destiny, or will you let the darkness consume you?"
Seraphine's gaze met his. Her chest ached with longing, fear, and determination.
She knew the path ahead would be treacherous, filled with pain and sacrifice, but for the first time she felt ready, not only to face the curse, but to face herself, and the man who had become both her salvation and her greatest mystery.
The first light of dawn brushed the castle towers with a soft golden glow, though the world beyond remained shadowed. Seraphine stood beside Lucian on the highest balcony, the wind tugging at her hair. Her heart was a storm of fear, courage, and anticipation. Below, in the forest, a figure emerged from the mist. A shadow from her past she had never dared face, a fragment of the life she had fled. Her pulse quickened. The figure stepped closer, revealing a familiar face, her family. But their expressions were not those of joy or welcome. They were heavy with regret, fear, and secrets she had never known. Her breath caught in her throat. The people who had abandoned her at 5, who had called her defective, were here now, drawn by the same darkness that had followed her all her life. Lucian's hand found hers, warm and firm, anchoring her.
"They are here because of you," he said, his voice steady but edged with warning. "And because of what you carry. The choice is yours. Face them or turn away."
Seraphine swallowed hard, feeling years of pain and longing collide. I have to know," she whispered.
"I have to understand." Together they descended the spiral staircase, the castle silent except for the soft echo of their steps. The hall stretched before them, empty but for the figures waiting at the far end. Her family's eyes fell on her, wide with recognition and fear. Seraphine's chest tightened.
The years of abandonment, the whispered insults, the sense of being unworthy. They all surged to the surface. Lucian stepped behind her, protective yet respectful, letting her take the lead.
She squared her shoulders and met her family's gaze.
"Why?"
she asked simply.
"Why did you leave me?"
Her mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears.
"We were afraid," she said, "of the curse, of what the bloodline carried. We thought we were protecting you by leaving. We were wrong." Her father's face was tight with shame. "We failed you, Seraphine, and now we are nothing without your forgiveness." Seraphine's voice trembled, a mix of anger and longing. "You abandoned me because you feared me, and now you expect—" "What? That I will forgive you easily." Lucian's hand rested lightly on her shoulder. "Forgiveness is a choice," he said quietly, "and strength is knowing when to give it. even when it is hard.
Seraphine drew a deep breath, feeling the fire in her chest. She had survived betrayal, abandonment, and fear.
She had faced creatures of shadow, the unknown of a cursed world, and had learned courage she never knew existed. Her family's presence no longer made her weak. It reminded her of the power she carried inside. I will forgive, she said, her voice firm. But I will not forget, and I will not be ruled by fear again. Her mother and father bowed their heads, tears streaming freely now, their remorse real and raw.
Lucien's gaze met hers, and in it she saw pride, not dominance. He had stood beside her, but he had never taken her strength. He had let her claim it for herself.
The shadows from the forest stirred once more. A cold wind swept through the hall, carrying whispers that chilled the skin.
Seraphine tightened her grip on Lucien's hand, knowing the final trial had come. The curse had not fully lifted. The darkness lingered, intent on consuming all that she had fought to protect. Lucien stepped forward, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light.
"This is it," he said, "the moment to end the curse." Together, they moved to the heart of the castle, to a chamber that pulsed with ancient energy.
The walls shimmered with silver light and the floor seemed to hum beneath their feet. At the center was a pedestal, carved with symbols older than memory, waiting for the one with unbroken courage to claim the power within. Seraphine stepped forward, heart pounding. She glanced at Lucien, whose gaze was steady and unwavering.
I am ready," she whispered. "Then we do this together," he said. And together they placed their hands on the pedestal.
Energy surged around them, warm and cold at once, wrapping their bodies in light and shadow.
The castle trembled, and the wind howled through the towers as the curse's remnants fought against release.
Shadows writhed, screaming without sound, clawing at the edges of reality. Seraphine felt the weight of centuries pressing down, felt the fear of the abandoned, the lost, and the cursed all at once. Lucien's voice cut through the chaos.
"Focus, Seraphine! You are stronger than this darkness! Let it see your courage!"
She closed her eyes, letting the fire inside her grow. The love, the fear, the hope, the sorrow, all of it blended into a single pulse of power. She reached into the darkness and held it, claiming it, refusing to yield. The shadows recoiled, writhing and screaming, until finally, with a burst of light so bright it filled the chamber, they dissipated. The air cleared, the castle sighed, and the weight of centuries lifted from the stones themselves. The curse was broken.
Seraphine opened her eyes and looked at Lucien. He was there, unscathed, yet his gaze held awe and relief. They had done it! Together!
The aftermath was quiet, almost tender. The forest beyond the castle seemed to breathe, the mist lifting to reveal sunlight glinting on leaves. The creatures that had once haunted them were gone, returned to shadow or banished entirely. The castle itself seemed to shimmer with renewal, no longer a prison but a home, a sanctuary. Lucien turned to Seraphine, his expression softened in a way she had never seen before. "You did it," he said simply. "You faced the darkness and did not falter. You are
extraordinary." Seraphine felt tears prick her eyes. "We did it," she corrected gently. "I could not have done this alone. Not without you."
He took her hand, lifting it to his lips, a gesture both intimate and respectful.
"And no one should. You trusted me and I trusted you. That trust, it saved us both."
For the first time, she allowed herself to feel the full depth of her emotions, fear, relief, pride, and a quiet, burning connection to the man who had become her protector, her ally, and something more. Her family approached cautiously, their expressions softening as they witnessed the bond between her and Lucien.
"You are..."
"Remarkable," her mother said, tears in her eyes. "We see now what we could not before. We were wrong to abandon you,
Seraphine shook her head gently.
You were afraid. That fear shaped your choices, but it does not define me. I forgive you, but I will always choose my own path. And that path Led me here.
Her father nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes.
Then we will follow your lead, he said humbly. And we will support the life you build from here, if you will allow it. Seraphine felt a sense of peace she had never known. The years of running, the abandonment, the fear, they had all led to this moment. She was no longer defined by the chains of others or by her past. She had chosen courage, she had faced darkness, and she had emerged stronger, freer, and whole.
Lucien moved closer, his gaze locking with hers.
And now,
he said softly, we are free to choose what comes next.
Not the curse, not the fear, but what we want for ourselves. Together, if you will let it. Her chest swelled with emotion.
She had never imagined love could feel like this, not the fleeting, fragile thing she had read about in books, but a bond forged in fire, trust, and shared trials. She nodded, a small, radiant smile breaking across her face.
Together, she whispered.
They stood on the balcony as the sun rose fully, spilling golden light across the castle and the surrounding forest.
Shadows that had lingered for centuries were gone. The air was filled with bird song, the scent of wet leaves and the quiet, steady pulse of life renewed.
Even with the darkness behind them, Seraphine knew the world would always carry challenges, threats, and mysteries. But for the first time, she felt unafraid. She had faced betrayal, fear, and ancient curses, and she had won.
Lucien's hand found hers again, and together they looked toward the horizon.
Their hearts beat in sync, their pasts acknowledged but no longer holding them captive. The castle, once a place of shadow and isolation, now hummed with promise, a sanctuary for the living, for the brave, and for those who dared to love despite fear. The wind stirred, soft and gentle, carrying a whisper through the towers. Seraphine smiled, her fingers intertwined with Lucien's.
Whatever shadows remained in the world, they would face them together. And whatever the future held, they would meet it as equals, as partners, and as something more than either had ever imagined.